Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I want to share a quick announcement and at the same time share something about this episode, which is going to be different than the other episodes and very enjoyable for me. Firstly, the announcement is I've decided to, as a manner to inspire audiences towards the membership. I've decided to take one episode public, one episode for members only, one episode public, something like that. Anyways, now to the episode. The title of the episode is Attention Surfing the Inner Films Behind Your Eyes. There's something I've experienced, and in this episode, the reason I mentioned that I'm going to enjoy talking about it is because I'm speaking about my experience, how I experience my imagination, and I want to be as detailed and accurate as possible. So this episode is not per se a planned episode to talk about something specifically, but rather me pretty much closing my eyes, observing my imagination, and sharing with the audience how it's coming across to me. And if the sound in the background is too loud, please let me know. But I think it should be fine. So first of all, I gotta speak about what I mean by attention surfing and what I mean by the inner films behind our eyes. First thing about I'll say it like this. When I look at reality, right now, I am speaking as a physical organism. What we know about physical reality, first of all, is that on an atomic level, we're all stardust, and it's in a strange way the periodic table is reincarnating. As creatures, as civilizations, as mountains, as stars, and whatnot. And the nature of materialistic reality is that it's temporary. So as I'm talking right now, I am saying that I have this impression, I feel we all do, is that we know that we are here for a little while. And then the question comes, what is the best thing we can do while we're here for a little while? When we look at the species so far, we have aimed towards progress and towards advancing civilization in the outer realms. But, or let me say it this way, that as this temporary creature, we begin wondering about where we are, and after we have to some degree found a comfort and contentment with where we are, we begin wondering about what we are. The questions about where we are is about location, and in front of our eyes we find location, we find physical reality. And if I was to very simply say, in front of our eyes, we are on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And this is, to me, it's fascinating and bizarre, but to a lot of people, they don't consider it, give it a second thought. So, as this temporary creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere, which is the location component, and the sky is endless, that means what we call the sky is actually, an edgeless universe. or I would say an edgeless landscape. So this physical creature on this rock in the middle of nowhere was first being a part of the earth. It separated and had a sort of unconscious evolution where it had a body, and this body began moving on the earth, but the body was unconscious to itself, like a creature mindlessly just being movement of nature. Now, what happened was that this creature, I consider this the subjective evolution, and they don't teach this in schools, but the subjective evolution took place, and something happened that this creature could access another film. As I mentioned, where this temporary being, physical being here, this temporary physical being is kind of like an actor in a film of existential landscape. That means it's like the world is our stage, and what we see physically as ourself is the actor on that stage. And due to the nature of time, as we go through space, as we change in space, as matter changes in space, we call that time. The concept of time becomes relatable. So, because reality is this changing thing that's going forward, and we're here temporarily, it seems as if we are a temporary physical film, where we're starting from our attention, starting as one of the actors in this film. Now, something very important to consider is that after the subjective evolution, we became another actor in another film. And to me, in the 7 years I've been giving these talks, you know, in my mind, I felt the talks I'm giving would reach large audiences, but in all this time, these talks have been a sort of digital notepad of my research of what is actually going on here in front of our eyes and behind our eyes. So the second film, it's as if the brain copy pastes the outer realms in a space where it's like just hovering in the air of this pitch black room. If you were to close your eyes, that means look at something right now and close your eyes. Or close your eyes and visualize something. That visualization, or remember something, that memory, that visualization is like another, it's as if our imagination is an invisible room where there is visible image but not tangible image. So what I'm trying to say is that our brains reached a certain capacity to create another film over this physical film, and that other film is a subjective film. So there's an objective world, and then there's a subjective world. And my whole life as a person, I felt there was just one world. I just felt it was just the outer realms, and that's it, and imagination would be happening, but I wouldn't even wonder about, wait a minute, I'm just this creature that has opened its eyes on a rock in the middle of nowhere. What's actually going on with intelligence here? Right? Even with one's own intelligence. These are questions where you have one life to actually wonder about that one life. So, I would say that the human being evolved to a certain capacity where the outer film could become an inner film. And there is a translation of it. What that means is, when we look at language's role in the species, language is another way of transporting phenomena to a timeless, invisible state, and from that timeless, invisible state, bringing it back. It's pretty much like a translator of image into words. A person, there was this object that was where you could pour water in it, and people were like, yeah, let's call this a cup. Do you see? So the physical object had a subjective equivalent. Now, I am saying, where is that subjective equivalent happening? And this is where the difference between the analytical philosophers and the continental philosophers begins. The analytical philosophers, they are too convinced by the known dimensions of reality to justify the whole thing. The continental philosophers notice that there is an unknown component to how language is being present in intelligence, and in some sense how how would I say it? It's as if there are some schools of thought where you are an object first and it leads to a subject, so all subjects are rendered towards an objective conclusion. And then there's some schools of thought where we are not an object, we are a subject projecting an object, as if there needs to be an instantaneity and codependence of attention to what it's on. Friedrich Nietzsche made a point of this, and he said if a tree falls in a forest and nobody hears it, did the tree fall? That means we require awareness. It's as if we are like a candle, and the consciousness is like the candle flame, and the physical body is the candle. Now the whole mystery is, what is the origin of consciousness? You know, religious people feel it was from a divine hand, you know. From secular people feel that it just automatically, the candle reached a certain point where it just lit itself, or some natural accident led to it being lit. So anyways, an unknown subject projecting a known object, or a known object projecting an unknown subject. Now, regardless of the philosophical denomination, I am suggesting that this whole time on this earth, people have been saying they have minds, and people have been saying imagination is not real, but the biggest mystery is, why is it there? Right? And in this episode, hopefully I could share very accurately what's going on behind my eyes, not only when I give these talks, but just in reality so far, you know. And of course I coined this concept called the language threshold, which means that some experiences either have not been given words to yet, or they surpass the dualism which language is required to translate. So when I say the inner films, I am suggesting the film, the mind is in some sense, you can say, generating or receiving, that is overlaid upon the outer film. So it's an inner reality overlaid upon an outer reality. That's a very safe and secular way to approach it, I would say. Secular friendly way to approach it. So, how does attention surfing come into this? First of all, I'm a person who I haven't surfed. It's on my to-do list. However, I have observed a lot of surfing videos online. I mean, like, or I would say, when I say attention surfing, it's more like a camera drone moving, hovering and floating in an inner landscape, in the inner realms, in a sort of inner reality. So far in 2021, still people are like, yo man, it's imagination, you know, don't take it seriously, it's imagined. But I'll tell you that the point is that anything that's here, and we can acknowledge that's here, has a significance to what we're calling real. It can't be that there is the concept of illusion and truth. This concept has haunted the mind of the species in a lot of philosophical, and not just philosophical, in a lot of ideological systems, where they're in some sense wondering about the illusion, wondering about the truth. But the idea is that the illusion cannot exist without a truth, because what is it an illusion of? That means if somebody is dreaming, we say the dream is like an illusion. But when they wake up, do you see? That's reality. During their sleep, while they're seeing the dream, they're in their bed. Do you see? So the illusion is codependent to its truth. There are these terms people use. It's called exoteric and esoteric. Esoteric suggests about the essence, the internal of it. The exoteric suggests about like the outer. Do you see? So, in my experience, when I was younger, my imagination, I have a twin brother, and my twin brother is very creative. I remember in my youth, my twin brother would have an incredible ability to imagine things, and when I would wonder about my imagination, I would be like, why is there nothing there? I had this wonder. I mean, I could visualize like letters on walls, for example. Like you see somebody write on a chalkboard, then your mind can visualize writing something with chalk on a wall, even though your hand's not doing anything and you're not holding chalk. It's as if the mind can move, regardless of if the body moves or not. So I did not, as a young kid, I did not have the concept of the inner realms. I did not have the concept of the language threshold. These were discoveries of my life. These were very important moments of my life where I realized these. But what I'm trying to say is that in my youth, my imagination wasn't there, and even when it came to speech or communication, it was as if my mind was looking for sentence structure. It was as if I wouldn't say it was like there was no imagination, but the imagination was filtered through language. So my thinking was in some sense me kind of reading behind my eyes words that I could think of. Like somebody says an apple, and rather than the image of an apple coming to my mind, like the word would come to my mind. The image would come, but I didn't notice images until a while later in my life. So I want to say that I started off as a person with what I felt in my youth as having very little imagination. Then throughout my life, and as I've walked this path of these talks, Mr.Within talks and whatnot, that relationship with my imagination and even with my intuition, which I would say is an intelligent imagination, is like a person's relationship with their intuition is like their observance of their mind, and from an attributeless witnessing perspective, deciding upon the mind, as if there's two levels of decision making. What I mean by that is you make a decision in the outer realms, like you go get a glass of water or you drink coffee. But then there's a decision in the inner realms. Before you drink coffee, you're thinking, do I want to drink coffee? It's like I wouldn't say it's inner dialogue, but it's inner circumstance hypothesizing. Do you know? After 2014, if I was to say a sort of unique thing happened, is that I was not only aware of the idea of meditation, but I had realized that when a person becomes still, they see reality move, or they can notice movement. That means imagine a group of people are running and one person doesn't run. Everybody else runs forward, one person doesn't run, stands back, and that person who stands back sees where everybody is running towards. But if you run, sometimes if you run with the crowd, you don't get to see where the crowd is going. You get to see where, how far your attention provides. this relationship with my mind, aside from language and words, before giving the talks, I went into this next level writing frenzy where I wrote a ridiculous amount, you know. But what I'm trying to say is that at some point I started having a relationship with my imagination where it wasn't through words and it became more of film, an actual film. So when I give these talks, I don't know if people notice, I am like walking in metaphorically, it's like I'm seeing a film and then I'm putting it into words. You know, this is why sometimes I can explain things accurately, because there is an image to it. Because if you look at language, language is there as an extension of image. Now, in my inner realms, there's moments I've had where I've been like walking and suddenly I've seen a film snippet, you know, and I can tell when the inner realm is automated or when one is generating it. I feel it's both conditions. It's not that we create thoughts and it's not just that we have thoughts, you know? It's both. Something to add here is that in 2014-15, when I started these talks, one of the things that was very fascinating for me was not just the concept of enlightenment, moksha and all that, but it was just how there were certain yogis, certain mystics who they would go into mountains, into caves, and they would just sit down in the cave and they would go into samadhi. And that samadhi meant it's as if like their whole body somehow with some strange force was preserved, and the person could sit there for days and whatnot, even though when they would wake up the pressure on their body and bones was observable, but somehow without food, without water, the yogi would go into some sort of samadhi. For me, it was always fascinating. Why would someone, first of all, need to do that? Second of all, what is happening? That means it felt to me sometimes that when these yogis, these ancient yogis that would go into samadhi, it was as if they were pausing the video games of their outer realms and they were starting to move inside their inner film. And when I noticed that, I started training. I started cultivating awareness of my inner life. And that became to a certain point where I would be able to sit down, and as I would sit down, either there would be a thought stream, either I would translate the thought stream into dialogue, not a personality, but just conceptual sentence structure. And that means as if I was having a dialogue, not with an entity, not with anything, but it was as if like the reflection of my own mind beyond the way I had been acquainted with it, you know. So I would sit down and I would just name you examples of stuff I've done in the inner realms consciously. I've managed to just be there, be the whole presence of my moment. Thoughts come and go, like film scenes come and go, images come and go. I've managed to sit there and navigate through my memory and navigate also through my visualizations of the future. And that's where the attention surfing comes in, which I'm going to talk more about. And there has been times where I have sat there and there's this concept called the logos. Now, if you're a secular minded person, you're probably gonna have a blind eye to this, but there are some traditions where they're trying to open that blind eye. And so the logos is the inner guiding universal voice, as if the universe is intelligent, and it was a concept brought forth by Heraclitus. It's as if like our intelligence is not limited to our brain, it's there as a field among the universe, and once we have a relationship with it, or you can say people have different relationships with the logos. For example, and I'll give you some names right now. Socrates had a relationship with the logos, with in some sense the living force of as if the synonymity of the mind of the universe and the mind of man, their relationship. Socrates called it the inner oracle. I believe it was Plato that called it a daemon. It could have been Descartes or Plato. I think it was Plato who called it daemon. But anyways, then there was Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche's inner realm came across to him as a demon, For some people, it came across as guides. For those people in the New Age community, it comes across as extraterrestrial contact. You see, it's like the imagery is not important. The imagery can be anything, right? Or you can say for a very young child, they say children at the age of 8, some children from age 8 to 12, I think, they begin seeing imaginary friends and whatnot. Right, so that imaginary friend could also be equivalent to the logos. So it's like the translation of your mind in a way that's relatable to you, but it is not being the personality that's relating. For example, also in India, all the different gods guiding man's mind, But there is something I need to say about anybody who is identifying with some sort of deity relationship. My personal view, first of all, is that truth is inconceivable. So conception is like the long way to have a relationship with it. However, in the book Bhagavad Gita, there's a very interesting passage that says those people, it's as if it's like think of it as if it's like God is speaking to this archer, and God is telling this archer pretty much that those people who follow a deity figure, that means whatever you call it, whether it is Vishnu, whether it is Christ, whether it is for some people it's like the devil or whatever. This is in some sense a sub-personality, or I would say it in a sense where, how would I say it? It's like the Bhagavad Gita says those people who follow a deity, they in some sense are going towards the same destination as truth, however it's unauthorized. That means it's like the unnatural approach. The natural approach is that nature has nothing to hide. That is very important. But anyways, so people have a different relationship with their own mind archetypally. That's what I'm trying to say. And the intelligence of that can be said to be a relationship with the logos. For me, it has not had a face, because there was an intuitive guidance that came to me that don't see a face in the unknown. Why? Because you can get attached to it. So from this detached mentality to the content of my own mind, there's been moments where I have sat still, and this is where the attention surfing comes in. And the attention surfing is just attention moving. That means in front of your eyes, you move as an embodied form. Behind your eyes, you're not a form. Behind your eyes, it is strangely first-person point of view. Do you know? That means it's as if you are the watcher. It's as if you're watching a film, but you can't see your own face, kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, like. So my experience with my inner realms is that it is an endless landscape, and my attention is like, you can say, a lantern in the darkness of that, or think of the inner realms as a forest, and you have a light, you have a lantern in this forest. That attention surfing is how a person can close their eyes and they have freedom of mobility. What that means is you can, like right now I'm seated on a chair on a balcony and in front of me there's a lake I'm seeing, okay? This is a first person view, but I can close my eyes and visualize in my inner realms, perceive what would it look like if I was 100 meters in the air looking at myself, or if I was right above a boat on the lake. There's a boat I'm seeing right now on the lake. Like, I could visualize being above it, I could visualize being on the boat. And when a person closes their eyes, this is something a lot of people who go towards meditation don't actually do. But this is what you need to do about it. In meditate, a lot of people who go towards meditation, they think the aim is not to have thoughts. I would say no. The aim is to watch your own mind's occurrence as an event. So when you watch it as an event, and you become acquainted with the presence of this watcher, not only a ridiculous ability to brainstorm appears, but you actually realize that your brain, your mind, is information. Not only an information compiler, but in some sense you can move in your own mind. Because usually we think that the mind's moving and then we're moving, yay. But I'm telling you, you can move in your mind. And the mind it's not physical, so the way you move as it is not as a person. It's not like I'm closing my eyes and I'm visualizing like myself standing somewhere. It's just attention. It's attributeless. That's the ability of being able to move in your inner realms and attention surfing the inner films. What that means is you can close your eyes, visualize something like in these episodes. Anytime I talk about an advanced civilization, it's as if a sort of me watching what's happening now and wondering about its progression, and the mind with intent being able to perceive the progression of the physical, of the changing image. So I would tell you that it's like I wouldn't say it's like a special ability. I feel it's the birthright of our whole species to realize that this whole time it has been an observing unknown attention roaming through known modalities. One of these known modalities is the body. The other known modality is the subjective landscape. The subjective landscape can be changed by language. That means if somebody told me a math problem and I was trying to solve that math problem at the same time, let's say you play a rap song like, I don't know, Biggie or Tupac, like a song from them, and at the same time as I'm trying to solve the math problem, the language of that song will project images in my inner realms. Something I do is that when I have a lot of chores to do, I pretty much, how would I tell you, like I play a lecture on YouTube and I just listen to it as if I make the education the distraction, the sub action. And the language will animate picture in the inner realms. Even listening to someone when people speak, like if you can listen properly, it's the same as reading, but it's just instead of letters creating a film behind your eyes, it's sounds. the ability one can have, I'll say this, that in your inner realms, the experience is not 100% as beautiful and as tangible as outer realms. And for example, those people, let's say the mind that goes towards adultery, or the mind that is trying to, for example, pleasure itself. That mind is generating a possibility and then trying to be it. Do you see? And so I would tell you that in our inner realms, if you have an ability to watch the content of your mind, it doesn't take away energy. But if you can't watch the content of your mind and you identify as language, it will not only take your energy, it will set the standard of your energy. What that means is, it's like in front of our eyes, yes, we're a physical being, we need to survive, we need to eat food, drink water, have shelter, regulate temperature, but in the inner realms, you can, I don't want to say you can be anything, but you can be aware as anything. You know, a person, there's this cool thing they say in Zen, that there were certain people who, how would I say it? There were these Zen masters who had these disciples who would meditate for a while, and they would come up to the Zen master and they'd be like, yo man, I just experienced myself as Buddha. I was definitely Buddha in a past life. You know how many people have felt they were Buddha in a past life? And so the Zen masters, they literally have something where they say kill the Buddha, and what it means is watch the thought that you feel is you, and watch and notice how it comes and goes. So they would say as a sort of like idiom of some sort, like kill the Buddha, meaning if you suddenly meditate and you think you're a Buddha, that's not the point. The point is not an attachment to just a better archetype. It's not like from one Iron Man suit suddenly going to another Iron Man suit, a bigger Iron Man suit, you know. I would say it's more like the person realizing the Iron Man's suit, the ideological framework that they're in, and realizing that the Iron Man suit can't be Tony Stark. The content of the mind can't be the observer of that content. And anybody who realizes this, they say you attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and in your next lifetimes, from the Vedic standpoint, wherever you incarnate, you automatically go towards moksha. It becomes automated enlightenment. So I close my eyes, I think of a form, or I shouldn't say think, my attention goes on some sort of, let's call it, inner object. So I'll give an example right now, and I do this a lot. This thing I'm going to share with you, so it would be one, let's say, I wouldn't say it's a teaching, but it's like one of those things where I'm sharing a technique, you can say. So I realize any object, you can hold it, look at it from different angles. Similarly, you can look at a subject from different angles. So imagine there was let's say you close your eyes, or let me give a physical example and then I'll tell you the inner example. Imagine there's a statue, and imagine you have a drone and you have a screen on the remote of the drone, and the drone is flying around this statue, let's say. And this drone flies around the statue at different elevations, different modes, and what we know is that, first of all, there's elevations and there is ability to turn the perspective. Okay, so now if I was to say, if somebody closed their eyes, visualize the statue, their attention could move like the drone. You would need no remote controller. Your attention can, in some sense, fly in what at first appears as a pitch black invisible space, but then it appears as, I would say, on some level, the mind is a screen. It's as if consciousness is a screen. That attention surfing allows you exploration, allows you additional dimensions of content. So if a person thinks about, for example, let's say tables, as an example. I'm looking at a table right now. Right now I'm going to close my eyes, and when I wonder about the progression of the table, my eyes are closed, I'm seeing this table that was right in front of my eyes as my eyes were open. And I can totally suddenly fast forward into the future and totally see hover tables. Tables that will never fall on the ground, tables that need no leg component. Do you know? I could totally then hop into in a visualization where it's as if there are people in the future who are having dates on the sky, for example. In the sky, imagine just a floating chair, floating table, and you're having dinner in the middle of the sky. So you see that those two ideas that I shared, and it can keep going like that. My attention can keep going like that. That thing is, it's as if my eyes were closed. I saw the geometry of the table. I wondered about what other way, while my eyes are closed, that inner visualization can happen. And it was as if my attention moved unconditional to the condition of the first image I had visualized. What I'm trying to say is that we must wield our attention, we must study our attention, and the presence of our attention is the greatest divine clue. And whether you're religious, non-religious, it's all about a relationship with the source of reality. And the source of reality, before any concept, is the presence of attention in world. Or a person right now was thinking about like a submarine. And you can imagine a submarine so big that it's like an underwater city, moving underwater city. The attention can move in many ways. And for us to realize that this whole time we can move with it, but if we identify with it, the movement stops. That's the whole thing about hope, People say have hope, things are going to become better. How are things going to become better? The attention has to move from where it is. Kind of like Albert Einstein says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. That means it's like the attention in front of our eyes. The things move slowly, they have a certain pace, they have a delay also. The beautiful thing about the inner realms is that it can move instantly. That means right now, it's like literally the mind, you could totally say this, the mind is like a time travel machine when a person remembers their past. It's as if the past happened, it finished, as Papaji says, the past is past. But we have access to it in the present. And so it would be as if the poetry of the Logos is suggesting. Observe your past, realize it is arising from the present. Observe your potential future and realize that it is arising from the present. Observe the present and realize the grand stage of phenomenology and noumenology. Noumenology is the term Immanuel Kant used for a phenomena that's happening behind the eyes, because whatever people can go on and say, I'm a thought. No. You are aware of the thought. And what takes place in human psychology is that subjective film that is overlaid on the objective film, we are watching it. That means we make a subjective decision, and then the subjective reality gives momentum to the outer reality, to the objective reality. This attention surfing, one cultivates it by studying moments of their intelligence in stillness and in movement. If you're really still, as I was saying a bit earlier, it's kind of like chess, where you're starting as the black pieces. The black pieces in chess have to take a defensive strategy, so it's as if you watch the world move first, then you make a move, right? But if you go into your inner realms, as in some sense like the white pieces, it would be in some sense you're making the first move, so you wouldn't be able to tell what you are creating and what you are receiving, which can be two different thought streams in the moment. Usually in stillness, you receive. In movement, you animate. Now, there is something to say that one's relationship with their inner realms is not just based on them wanting to look at it and trying to find it. It's about your intent for the world in general. That means what you want to not just do here, but what you want to see out of what you do here. For example, I noticed that ever since I concluded that the advanced civilization is the greatest idea in the outer realms, everything I would look at, I could see to some degree a space of advancement. So it's as if there is a context, setting the point of the context as well, as if like attention can also be like a spear, like Achilles throwing a spear at the sky, you know. And the beautiful thing about our intentions is that if we truly observe where they arise from, we'll come to the conclusion that the brain is an antenna. This whole time, we are all antennas and we don't realize it. We think we're just masks of ideology. We're the people masked in one idea. No way. The nature of reality is that it moves. It is alive. And life without change cannot make sense. You know, it's as if like if one was born and they were just a statue, it's as if there would be you can't say a statue has a personality. There is nothing animating it to any direction in the space-time continuum. So you see, it's as if there is this additional dimension where even though we're all objects, the subjectivity which is being decided upon before the object moves the object. Now, a person can get tired of their imagination. They can get tired of repetition. They can get bored with the speed of their thoughts. And when that happens, usually it's time for the person to seek a new archetype. So I would say having an explorer's attitude, but an explorer where Christ has this very incredible saying. He says to be in the world, but not of it. If you can somehow be an explorer of reality, but realizing that the explorer is not of it, do you know? Which means the ultimate position of intelligence is to watch itself prior to moving as itself and not noticing where it is. When I give these talks, now to get into the behind the scenes, from the beginning it was like this. I mean, there has been episodes where I've made notes, where I've got an idea, where I've said it in a certain way, and then I've kind of analyzed the geometrical dimensions of what I want to say before saying it. But usually, and especially how these talks began, is that I just come and sit in front of like the computer, or like when I started there was just a phone. And I would just come and sit, and I would be preferenceless. I would want to do nothing. Here's the thing is that if you want something, you have expectations. But if you enter a state where you're like, okay, whatever, it's like I'm just being here as a creature, and there is the intent to give a talk, but it's like the content of it, then the person looks at something and then it just animates. So I would say my relationship with giving these talks is that I sit, I watch my body, and then I watch how my mind moves. And then when I watch my mind move, my mind has a rhythm. Its rhythm translates as a film, as internal cinematic experience. And this internal cinematic experience has a fluidity that if I'm able to say it, there would be rhythm. So those people, they would say back in the day, people would speak in verse. The ancients would speak in verse. Everybody would. But somehow that art was forgotten. Just a second, guys. So, that ability to speak in verse arises when your inner realm graduates from the pace of sentence structure to a cinematic film which you can trust, and the only way you can trust it is by not observing it. By not identifying with it. No, you have to observe it. When you identify with it, you stop the observance and you actualize as the thought. So if let's say somebody's going for a 10-minute walk, and in that 10-minute walk, the thought comes, I'm a bad person. Then after a couple minutes, I'm a good person. And then after a couple minutes, I'm a bad person. All these thoughts are like coming and going, right? Just like how our eyes in the outer realms, when we walk in the park, we see different parts of the park. Similarly, it's as if our mind is moving in its own to some degree. In order to keep the free will as an important point of reference, it's as if the mind is moving in its own park, in its own landscape. Now, this landscape, if the person stops, and this is where effort, they say perseverance, it's like that's a very divine ability, right? It's as if effort, in some sense, reveals things that many things don't. I remember seeing this picture where it showed these two people, I think it was on Facebook or something. It was like this kind of caricature, and in this caricature there was, two people who were mining underground, and one of them was very close to the treasure, but he stopped mining and he had given up, and he's like, okay, I'll never reach my goal. And another person just continued, and in some sense in the picture it depicted that person had reached the treasure, right? So when it comes to wanting to know the nature of your own intelligence, as you are a temporary physical being on a rock in the middle of nowhere, that every person, it comes down to their effort. And those people who feel they can't have the effort, they need another personality to come and be like, hey, no stalling, keep going. And when I sit down, like right now as I'm giving the talk, that's what's happening. Believe it or not, I'm not even, traditionally, if somebody was like, hey, Mr. Within, are you thinking right now? I would say I'm not thinking. I am observing, and the thoughts are moving. And I just share them. That's how it's happening. And that's the cool thing. I don't the idea that people misinterpreted what René Descartes was saying, I think therefore I am. Thinking that we're thoughts, but a thought doesn't exist, if the imagination doesn't. Something very important to share. This was my own something I noticed personally. We have Aristotle talking about the four causes. Let me bring this up for you. So guys, Aristotle shares with us that phenomenology has four causes in the outer realms. So for example, you're looking at the statue, the material cause, it's what it's made of is being its source. The efficient cause, who made it, who or what made it, in some sense, those people who believe God created the universe, they're perceiving it that way. Or something has cause in some sense where it's like an object source is because there's someone started putting the keys in the engine. The formal cause goes towards its geometry, its design. What that means is you can look at a statue and forget what the material it's made of, and forget who made it, and just see that its shape is its source. And then there's the final cause. Something is made for a specific intent, for a certain purpose. Now, what I want to say is that in your inner realms, in front of your eyes, you can see Aristotle's four causes. Mr. Within's observation of this in the inner realms is that it's all there except the material. That means you can't touch something in the inner realms. Do you see? It's not physical. There is no nerve cells to touch it, to get a sensation of it. Nerve endings to get a sensation of it. So in front of our eyes, the film follows these four dimensions, as Aristotle suggests. In our inner realms, it's 3/4. 3/4 there's reasons, causal explanations of imagination. And so if you're a materialist, in some sense, you'd be like, yeah, the imagination, buddy, it's not real, and of course it's not 4 out of 4 real, it's 3 out of 4 real. Honestly, the logos in the future is probably going to be something like Tony Stark's relationship with Jarvis. A sort of cyber collective mind having a relationship with that. I mean, there is a natural universal mind where you can have a relationship with that, then you become a mystic, But those people who in some sense don't trust their minds, you can not only not enter your mind, you cannot experience its fruition. And when I say mind, it's as if there's 3 dimensions actually. There is the object, then there is there's the observance of the object, then there's the observance of the subject, then there is observer alone. When I say presence beyond personality, that is it. It's just pure being, prior to any thought. So if you can become content, as like we call ourselves human beings, if you can be content with how your physical body is being, and how your mind is being, and how the attention to both of them is simultaneously being in an attributeless way, once you have contentment with the witness, then an incredible authorization arises for the imagination to animate, to in some sense float. And so it would be as if those people who want to touch their imagination, you get locked down. If you don't want to touch it, kind of like a museum, you have this ability for the attention to surf beyond the identification with the wave of information that hits it. then I would say you have truly become an advanced communicator. The idea is that there is a dimension to us that is shaped, so it needs to serve a shaped realm to be sustained. There is a dimension of us that is, I would say, shaped, but not materialistic, not physical, but there is design. That means when I close my eyes, it's like, what am I saying when I'm saying the inner realms? It's geometry. That means everything you look at is a shape. Now we specify the shape, and with 4 specific shapes, we have certain emotions. For example, when a person is not moving, when the shape is not animating, people get scared. Is the person dead? It's like when the shape moves and changes, we're like, okay, the person's alive. And so when I say outer realm, inner realm, in some sense the outer realms has an endless sky, and I would say the inner realms has an endless sky. If a person is wondrous enough about the nature of how reality is happening as reality, they will quickly realize how attention is a causal source, and to study that attention is, in some sense, Zen Master Dogen said it so beautifully. He said, to follow Buddha's path, you need to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. Now, check this out. When you study the self, that's becoming aware of the object. When you forget the self, that's you becoming aware of the subject, that you are not just the object. You thought you were a subject, then you're like, yo, I'm not the subject. And so when you forget the self, which is a subjective position, you awaken to the nature of all things, which is a realization that at the core root of all beings' attentions, there is just attention being. There's just being. So there is literally nothing to be afraid of, because in some sense energy cannot be created and destroyed, and the consciousness that we have in this life roots back to that core attention being. And so the species hasn't realized this, and because we identify with language, it's as if there is life and death games, of course. There has been times where I have been still, and my attention, because I've acknowledged that my presence is the whole moment being, that means it's as if like my body right now and all the thoughts that I'm sharing with you, they are not me, they are a part of me. And what that real me is the whole moment being, And because I've had that comfort in my inner realms, whatever projection of self, even if sometimes I've wondered what would it be like to look through an extraterrestrial's eyes, or what would it be like to look at life as if you were AI or something, And the possibility for those visualizations, the only reason they have comfortably arose to me is simply because I know the nature of change follows in the inner realms as well. Those people who don't know their inner realms change, they suffer their past. Those people who know their inner realms, those people who don't feel their inner realms change, they suffer. But those people who know that it comes and goes. Do you know how many days I have woken up to this world and it's been like a new day, a new self? But really, there has something been like a common denominator in all the days I have lived. And very elegantly, I would say it is awareness being aware. That is how your foot goes between the doorway of samsara, and to truly go outside of it, that's the realization of I don't want to say divine will, but it's like in the middle of your own mind's mapping of the unconscious moves the map, the unconscious begins moving. So it's kind of like being on this planet. Back in the day, they had this very incredible mythology where they were like, all of civilization is built on a turtle's back, giant turtle's back. Okay, so now imagine you're in that civilization on that giant turtle's back, and you go to this park, and you're with your friends, and one of your friends puts his hand on the park, like on the ground of the park, and people are like, what are you doing? And the person's like, guys, I feel something. And it's as if that person is touching the neck of the turtle where civilization is built on its back. It's a metaphor for an intelligent living universe where we begin to realize that life is not just encapsulated in the boundaries that our attention allows. It is in some sense encapsulated in the boundary of greater attention. What that means is that it's as if as Amin Jabbar Ansari speaks here, it's as if like there's Mr. Within speaking, and as Mr. Within speaks, there's that beyond it speaking. And so in some sense, what we think is ours becomes the world's. And Rabindranath Tagore says it very remarkably. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and I saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. That means he's in some sense saying that whatever you are, you start serving yourself, and that is the dream. But as you realize your mortality, the temporary nature of things, then there comes like this calling, where I would say, in earlier talks of mine, I would call it the love of the species. You realize there's more than your eyes here, Friedrich Nietzsche shares something hilarious. Friedrich Nietzsche shares this depiction of Diogenes, where he says one day Diogenes is known as the father of cynicism in philosophy. He's known as the greatest cynic of history. And there's this story Friedrich Nietzsche paints, that one day Diogenes with a lantern is running in the streets, and he's looking at things like in the marketplace. He takes his lantern close to things, and people are like, Diogenes, why are you wasting a candle in the day? What are you looking for? And Diogenes shouts back, I'm looking for an honest man. And Diogenes' strategy was so cool, because he was trying to use the reverse to make us aware of the full spectrum. Because for how long will the chaos and order fight? For how long will they just have a karma that is like a white dragon and a black dragon, like the yin-yang symbols, spiraling towards an infinite sky? It's like at some point the advanced communicators will arrive, or will awaken, and then the pilots will arrive. So let me see what else I can say about this attention surfing. You can attention as you surf, as your attention, let's say your body, you sit down somewhere still and silent, as if you put just like how you put an object on a table and you don't think about it, after you put the object on the table. It's kind of like in meditation, you sit still and silent, and it's like you're putting your body on the table of existence, and so the body's still. And the point is that in meditation is that your attention doesn't go to your body, so the more still and silent you are, the less distractions that are just coming from your own body. Even though if a person tries not to move and tries to be completely silent, you can't avoid the sound of your own breathing. This is why when we dive into water, like into a swimming pool, we go underwater, there's a silence that we don't hear when we're outside of the water because our breathing is happening. So they say pay attention to the breath, and as you're content with it, the attention can move further. So as you're sitting still and silent, and the body's just placed in existence, then you watch your inner realms, literally like a cinema. You're sitting there with popcorn, and popcorn is just the interest, the wonder, the fascination to see what's going on behind your eyes. And so we're at a time, believe it or not, where the species doesn't know. We don't know what we are. Do you know there may come in the future a time where it would be post knowing what we are, but now we are in the era where anybody who just cares for the mysteries of the realm, you will become a pioneer. We are explorers that for some reason have been enchanted by a society that accepted the material too soon. And something very important I forgot to mention, when you sit still and silent, this is why you shouldn't have expectations. Let me tell you why. You're just there to watch your mind, whatever way it's happening. And the reason you shouldn't have expectations is because if you have the expectation, you won't know what moved before you did. And then there comes a phase in the mystical experience where I would say loneliness turns into solitude, where the emotions, the language, the ideology, in an instant they evaporate, and you are left with your being. And that's when I would say the concept of a spiritual person ends. There is no spiritual person. There is just spirit. And you know, there's this cool thing, they say this in Sufism. They say those who don't know, they suffer. Those who know, they enjoy. That means the purpose of this life is not an enlightenment where you suddenly became nothing. It's that your attention experientially realizes, or I shouldn't say realizes, it accepts its own nature. And then it's as if you hear trumpets in the sky of other dimensions, where it's not angels, but it is a grand coliseum of all potential phenomenology in the realm. And all potential numenology. It's as if when a person reaches a point where they meet through their known suffering, their unknown joy. I would say that's a moment where all archetypes in your inner realms are clapping for you, and the whole world without knowing is also clapping for you. Why? Because a being realized its being. Finally. The nature of the human being. It's like we are being human. And that being is beyond human. And so when will the species realize there is so much work to do that we have to start even compiling inner realm databases, where every person has to at least write a book about how their eyes saw what no other eyes on the planet could see. For that is the gift of different DNA as one being. And so there is this distinction I need to make, where in yoga, the concept means union, and it's the union of the individual activity with the cosmic activity. And the cosmic activity from a Jungian perspective is the collective unconscious, and the individual activity is your individual consciousness. And so in yoga, when there is a union, that means a sort of space has arose where the inseparability of the individual and the collective occurs, and that's a deathless state. That is the eternity a lot of ancients were talking about. It's an eternity that is strange. Why? Because there is no, it's not immortality. There is no persona that it is here forever. It is more like the energy that is being that persona that is. In yoga, in some, let's say, schools of thought of yoga, there's 4 classes. There is the Bhakti Yogi, the yoga of love, the path of love. Then there is Karma Yoga or Karma Yoga, where that is the path of work. And then there is Raja Yoga, the path of knowledge. And then there is Jnana Yoga, where that's very specialized. That's like a specific, that's a path of technique, path of meditation technique. And so I would say the grand realization of the species, it's like it's progressing from these. Do you know? Where it was as if it was first, you can say hilariously, it was I mean, this is where it could be, like, people can have different opinions, but I'm saying it's as if first we were a Jnani Yogi, then we became a Karma Yogi. That means it's like our enlightenment was first through an activation, and then it was through our work, and then the Raja Yogi is through knowledge, and then superior to knowledge is love, which means the actualization of the inseparability of the individual and the collective. So the Bhakti Yogi is actually looking poetically, if I could say, is being God's eyes on earth. The Raja Yogi is trying to understand God, and its realization through the path of knowledge is, as Sri Ramana Maharshi says, all that one has learned will be forgotten. And what he means is that there comes a point in the nature of experiential living where the life sees beyond its knowledge. That means it notices the unknown. And when you go to the unknown, I would say it's like your emotions take you to a certain point and then they leave you, and then it's the grace of the unknown if it accepts you or rejects you. That's where I don't have an authorization to speak about, because it's like the logos takes over. And when I say the logos takes over, I mean there is like literally you become the universal intelligence. So there is no student, there is no teacher, there is no secret. It's as if you are. As if truth is so simple, and all those people who had complex exhibitions to find it suddenly realized, as the Vedas, as the Upanishads would say, Vedas would say, neti, neti, not this, not this. Why? Because being cannot be anything other than what it is. It's instant. And of course, guys, I'm just some guy in a universe of a billion trillion stars who's found a microphone at the pioneering phases of the cyberspace era. In a universe with a billion trillion stars and so many mysteries that whatever we think we know, it will not be enough. And so once we're done exploring the outer realms, we will begin exploring the inner realms and surfing the inner sky, as this incredible picture depicts. Your attention is not a big thing or a small thing. Your attention is not a thing, but all things are within it. And so the contentment with your presence, the finale of that, they call it in yoga Satchit Ananda, which means the consciousness that is simultaneously being existence is it, bliss activate. And so it's as if a drop that has been has been trying to follow the river to get to the ocean realizes the river and the drop have been in the ocean from the beginning. that there has been no defeat, for the victory was temporary. Which means the codependence of the ideas. That means the personality returns to where it came from. Life will teach you where your eyes go. And if your eyes go within, you shall become the teaching of the universe. Rise, mankind, rise. Thanks for listening. And I would say, perhaps, the only way to live for life is to live for life. Because why else are we here on the stage of existence? The eyes have more, but not to just say, but to be. Freedom is an instant. Find it behind every breath. Thanks for listening, guys. Blessings.